Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi of Device Talks. Welcome back to Device Talks Tuesdays. It's July 16th, a lovely summer day, but I put the collared shirt on for you. This is not a AI filter. This is an actual collared shirt in the middle of the summer. I did this for you, Device Talks Tuesdays. Hope you all appreciate it. But you have a great conversation today. It's the title is Advanced Simulation in Medical Manufacturing, How to De-risk and Optimize Your Processes. It's brought to you by Flex. And as I mentioned in an email going out, I thought this was very cool, and I didn't know it was possible what we'll be talking about. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot. You can find resources in the widget. We'll have a presentation there for you. For those who are watching live, but recognize that you have a colleague or a friend or relative or enemy who would benefit from watching this, let them know that they can watch this on demand. They can register at devicetalks.com. We should have this up tomorrow, and Q&A will be largely at the end of the webinar. We'll try to address things as they come if it's pertinent to that point we're making right then and there, but by and large we'll be addressing questions at the end. Even if you're watching on demand, you can ask your question at any time. Someone from Flex will get back to you. If you're watching this live, we'll address your questions toward the end, but as always, we ask you to submit your questions as they come to mind, so we know how many are coming and we can kind of better budget our time. All right. Podcasts. We have lots of podcasts. You can find those at devicetalks.com. Looks like we've got a little kind of reaction emoji up there, which is kind of cool. And we also have a conference coming up, Device Talks West, October 16th and 17th. It's going to be a great couple of days. We'll be talking about interventional tools, surgical robotics, connected health, neurotech, structural heart. So check out the emerging agenda, the growing agenda at Device Talks West. And sorry, just want to make sure. Oh, okay. I spoke incorrectly before. No presentation in the widget, but there is a case study for you to download. So apologize for that. So just take a look at the slides as they're coming through. I should have cleared that up before we started all of this. And but it's going to be a great talk nonetheless, and case studies are awesome. So you get to walk away with that. All right. So now enough of my dilly-dallying. Let's hear from the fine folks at Flex. We have our presenters here, Craig Dixon, Systems Engineering Manager at Flex, and Malin Rao, who's the Senior Manager of Applications Engineering at Flex. So gentlemen, I will stop talking and allow you to impart some knowledge on our Device Talks Tuesday audience. Take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for the introduction and setting us up for the seminar. First things first, Flex is a global design and manufacturing partner. We work with a lot of medtech and pharma companies, and everything that you see in the next 30 minutes, we've been using that for many years now. So we've been doing a lot of advanced manufacturing work, including simulations and digital twin over the last many years. That's why we thought we'd come here and share some of our expertise. I've got Craig with me, and the two of us are going to take you through today's presentation. Over the next 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, what you're going to see is these four topics. I'm going to kick this off with talking about some of the macro trends that we are seeing within the medtech manufacturing space. This will lead us into some of the concepts that Craig has. He's going to walk us through three big chunks: visualization, simulation, and eventually he's going to focus a lot on digital twin. That will lead me into Industry 4.0. So I'm going to come back in. I will double click on AI and automation a little bit and show you the role in continuous improvement. How do companies improve their processes, improve their structures to leverage the most out of Industry 4.0? What I'm going to do is I will wrap this up with a quick case study, and then Craig and I are both going to take Q&As. Feel free to ask as many questions as you want. For people listening to this webinar offline, send us an email. You'll find our information later on in the slides. All right, so that being said, let's jump right in. What do we see as far as global medtech companies go? Everybody wants to deliver products faster and at scale. That's the general mentality that a lot of these medtech companies are following. What that means is people want to gather as much data as they want and as they feel like. Um, it helps them with real-time decision making. The more data there is, the more analytics you can use to process that data. That brings me to the next point of how do we optimize production within the medtech space using all the data that I've gathered so far. So we see a lot of emphasis on data collection, data processing using optimization. And the whole goal is how do I get to the market faster, right? How do I put good, reliable products into the hands of users and patients? So that's the faster go-to-market strategy that a lot of these global medtech companies are following. Last but not the least, everybody wants to differentiate themselves, right? So how do I differ from some of my competitors? What do I bring to the table? What value am I bringing? Is this really useful? Is this a big change as compared to status quo? So those are the four big chunks that global medtech companies are thinking about, keeping faster and at scale in mind. When I take all this, what we are seeing today is we can narrow this down into four macro trends. You can see them in four different columns. Let's start with the one on the left. Like I said, data. Data is everywhere. People love data. Of course, it's got its pros and cons, but one big trend that we are seeing within Flex and with our OEM partners is how do I digitize everything? How do I integrate my advanced analytics, advanced technologies to build products using this data that I'm gathering? Craig is going to talk through his slides. He's going to walk us through his slides. But that's the digitization of everything portion within the macro trends. Another mega trend that we're seeing is manufacturing transformation. How do I apply the Industry 4.0 principles towards my manufacturing ecosystem? So that is something that I will discuss in the next few slides, but that's my second big chunk about manufacturing transformation. The third one is people are constantly thinking about how do I regionalize things? How do I relocalize it? How do I focus on relocalization of the value chain? Think about it this way. I want to manufacture something in the region where people are going to use my products. So that's the sentiment that's going on within the medtech space of how do I rapidly change my manufacturing strategies to meet with the dynamic demand and put the right products in the right customers in the right region. So that's the regionalization and the local value chain principle. Last but not the least, we love manufacturing, designing everything sustainable product. So there's amazing, and I'm very proud of this, there's a lot of emphasis on sustainability. You design for environment, you design for manufacturing, you design for sustainability, and you manufacture all that with sustainability mindset. So that paradigm is really sticking. So with these four, these are some of the macro trends that we are seeing today. And then a lot of companies are doing this by themselves, right? But if they can't, that's when Flex comes in. We are your partners. So a lot of people come to us saying that, hey, can you meet some of these four pillars? And can you be our trusted manufacturing and design partners as far as the medical device manufacturing goes? I briefly mentioned digitization. I'm going to pass this on to Craig, where he'll take us deep into the world of simulation. So Craig, it's all you from this point.
Thanks, Milind. Thanks, Tom. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes expanding on one of the trends or topics that Milind mentioned a minute ago, digitize everything. So, you can digitize your concepts and ideas by using visualizations, 3D visualizations, which are great for communicating ideas. Later, as you're designing and developing the system, you can digitize the production algorithms and the production logic and how those interact, the intelligence, so that your team can find the challenges and set expectations before production actually begins. Advances in computing power and the ability to connect everything have basically enabled what we would call a true digital twin, which combines digitizing everything from the concept to the operations to digital data about the current and future operations of the system. Okay. In the previous slide, I showed visualization, simulation, and digital twin as separate entities, separate things. Really, they're a continuum of technologies. They're all related, but they exist on the same line. Now, I'm going to point out before I go too much further on that there are multiple different definitions of digital twin, but I'm going to prefer to use the definitions shown here, which essentially come down to they're useful digital models of physical, currently operating systems, not pre-systems. I don't quite consider that a digital twin. At its most basic level, what I'm describing here as a digital twin is a way to digitize static data for easy access. You might have heard that called as a BIM system, or building information management. That's actually really a form of digital twin. As you go add more connectivity and intelligence, you can get more information about what's actually happening in the system. As you go further up, your level 3 digital twin can help you predict what is going on, what might go on in the next few minutes, so you can adapt to that. A comprehensive twin, which is what we really are all striving for right now, makes real-time decisions by evaluating multiple different possibilities, lots of what ifs, and then helping you make the decision right then for going forward. The ultimate goal, of course, is the level 5 digital twin, where it's somewhat more autonomous and it handles a lot of that yourself. Now, I went through all that fairly quickly, so I'm going to spend a few minutes on each of those topics and take a slightly deeper dive into visualization, simulation, and digital twin separately. So why do you want to do a visualization? Well, I mean, they look good. They're great for attracting attention to your capabilities or to your product or your facility. They're useful for executive presentations. And I will also point out, one of the things that's great about these is they're much faster and easier to do today. Just every year over year, they've gotten infinitely easier. Since I really first started working with those, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, they've gotten so much easier. And in fact, many of the tools that you can use to do this now were actually made for completely different industries. Video game design is actually one that comes to mind as being a technology that you can actually use a lot for this kind of thing, for visualization, to tell people what is the system going to look like and make them understand and like it. There are other reasons for doing a visualization, though. Sometimes they're not quite as photorealistic, but they can actually help you communicate ideas much better than, say, a 2D CAD drawing or a blueprint. If you really want to get more impact, another feature of many 3D packages like that is you can actually put on AR glasses, augmented reality glasses, and see it in your facility, or VR goggles and actually see the entire facility itself, even sort of walking around it. One of the neat things about if you do that is it makes it much easier to do things like evaluate the ergonomics of your workstation using the VR or the AR. But there's actually more reasons than that for doing a visualization. I'm going to show a video here. Take a second. There it goes. In this video, what we're showing is how you might rearrange a system when you have modular manufacturing items, how you could actually rearrange a system to create a different production line. Seems like a fairly simple concept, but it's much easier to transmit this to perhaps executives or to customers who are interested in that kind of thing using something like this. So that's another really good reason for using it. One other good reason for using them might be training. One of the things that we've implemented is some safety trainings where you can actually teach people how to do safety training, lockout, tagout, without actually having them be at risk because the machines are running. And you can train new operators, new headcount, without actually slowing the line down while they learn, or without taking the equipment offline altogether. A lot of times that you might call that as a gamified thing. It actually works for them as if it's a video game. They may or may not put on the video goggles depending on how you do it, but it actually makes it much easier, and they can learn a lot more quickly. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about simulation modeling and analysis. And I phrase it that way for a reason. Simulation is, in fact, the most mature of the three areas that we're discussing here. As a technology, it's been available and useful since at least the 1970s. But now that we're getting to the point where we can digitize everything, it's worth revisiting and talking about it some more. One of the most important things that I want to bring out from this about simulation is the deliverable of a simulation is the analysis. It's not the model, it's the analysis. Without an analysis, the model is basically just an animation or maybe even a glorified spreadsheet. So let's talk a little bit more about simulations. So simulation models aren't all the same. If you're doing something different, you don't build the same model. So early in the process, frequently, once you've got your visualization and now you've got the concept, and you want to make sure that that concept will work, you'd build a proof of concept model. The question is, can it work? How should it work? You're not putting incredible levels of detail in it, but you're putting in enough that you're quite confident that you can work around anything that you come across. You want to make sure that the system is going to operate or capable of operating correctly. Once the contract is signed and you're starting to do the actual engineering of the production line, now you have the question, will it work? And we might call that a proof of engineering model. You're going to be working with the automation engineers and the industrial engineers and the product engineers to design a much more detailed model. And by the way, it's likely to be iterative. You may find something out that they hadn't thought of, because by default, by definition, simulation includes time and interactions between systems that you just don't get by doing things statically. Now, once the system is built, you can still use models. You can build an even more detailed model, but you might, I've seen it called proof of operations or optimization, or the one I like is operational forensics, that says, how can it work better? Can you improve your yield? Can you improve your throughput? Can you reduce the headcount? Or maybe you might phrase the question a little differently, and phrasing the question is really important in all of these, of can I meet the increased demand because my client really likes what we're doing and they want to buy more? The other thing I'll point out here, and this is maybe repeating a little bit what I said a minute ago, but don't overlook the analysis. In a typical simulation project, the analysis is probably at least 40% of the project time. It's not something of, I've built the model, now I have the answer. You actually need to do the experiments. You've basically built the laboratory, now you have to use that laboratory. When you're doing that, you want to test a lot of alternatives. In fact, it's not strictly necessary for all those alternatives to even be practical. Sometimes you can learn a lot about how a system might actually operate by trying something that you know it would never be asked to do. In addition, you're going to want to test each alternative multiple times. I mean, keep in mind that the way your facility is running today is probably, 5-10%, maybe more different than what will happen next Tuesday. There are random things that happen. Simulation is really good at being able to test that, so you can get an idea of the range of possible values, so you can get a final answer for what a long-term capacity of your system might be. I'll also point out that this analysis requires a lot of planning in advance. You have to actually think about what the questions you're going to ask it are, make sure the model's built to answer those, has the appropriate graphs, and then go through all those analyses. But in addition to the planned ones, you're likely to find something new, and you want to follow that result to ask those new questions. The other thing I'll say is with simulations, and almost all of the more modern simulation packages have connections that will let you tie it into an AI system. They can create very large data sets, and indeed that's what an AI system is good at, is using, getting useful information out of a large data set by seeing how things relate. Okay, digital twin. Let's talk about that. It's a big topic in the last number of years. It's still, and I think you won't be surprised for me to say this, it's the least mature of the technologies that we're talking about today. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, there's still several different views about what actually counts as a digital twin. And again, I'll restate that for our definition, for our purposes, a digital twin is a connected model of a physical, currently operating system. Its primary use is to help us make tactical and sometimes strategic decisions in reaction to the current state of the production line. So, digital twin. Now, classically, when you see them, you see great graphics, and that's pretty typical. And you can see some different levels of detail that you might get out of a digital twin here. You can get the top one is very, very photorealistic. The one to the lower right is a little bit more representational, but has a really good way of showing, in this case, the temperature in each one of those areas, for either because it might impact your product, your production, or it might actually impact your employees. So, but the big but here is the digital twin is much more than the graphics. In fact, it probably doesn't actually require a whole lot of graphics. It's great to use them, and they do make it useful, but it's not the key requirement of it. The key requirement of a digital twin is the connectivity to the systems. And a digital twin is going to collect data from many different systems within your facility. And I think this was what it took me the longest time to learn and understand what the real benefit of a digital twin is. A good digital twin is able to talk to multiple different systems in your facility, so that you can now get information about all of these and use them in your decision making. There's obvious ones where you're dealing with production information like throughput and yield, time in system, and things like that. Earlier, Melinda mentioned sustainability as one of the macro trends. You got a lot of times you can get sustainability information about how much power is being utilized by each one of the devices within your system, or to create each unit. There are physical environment things, maintenance items. There may be other things that have to do with personnel, who's there, who's signed in or not, and about safety. You can get all kinds of things from, does someone have on their PPE, their smock? Depending on where you are, it might be, steel-toe boots or hard hat or whatever. Are there things moving that might get in their way? So you can connect all that kind of stuff. And the neat thing about it is, from those, you get out of it information about your productivity, about the system status. You get alerts that, hey, for instance, the temperature is increasing. Maybe I should go check on it, or predictions about what is about to happen. A more advanced digital twin, though, is what we're really all striving for here. So, at a minimum, you're going to want to have a predictive digital twin, what we might consider a level 3 digital twin, which, as I mentioned, you might go for trend analysis. The temperature is increasing. It doesn't say it's gone over the alarm level. It's just it's going up, and it might go over it soon. So it's going to point that out to you. It might show your yield is dropping. It might show you that you need to replenish things. It might show that your finished goods buffer is filling. Lots of different things like that. You can think of an awful lot more than I have on the list there. Taking it a step further, you can get to what we would call a comprehensive digital twin, which typically what makes that is it's going to have a simulation very similar to the simulation we were talking before about an operational forensics built right into it. And that will then be able to let you do a lot of what if questions, and answer them right there on the spot using data from your current state of your actual system. Sometimes a comprehensive digital twin will also have other things using machine learning for things like vibration and sensors, IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things sensors for vibration, and do predictions like that of, you should probably go take care of that before it fails so that you have a chance to fix it off shift. And of course, as I mentioned before, our goal ultimately, and this is for most people a ways in the future, but it's certainly the goal we're all working towards, is an autonomous digital twin that takes all of that information, uses some AI to suggest how it should be run, and in the most detailed case, actually goes and takes care of it. It actually says, yep, this is what we're going to do. It may or may not ask for operator intervention on that. Even it may just go and do it depending on what the task is. And that's really the goal, is to be able to take that information and put it into an autonomous digital twin. So now that we've talked a good bit more about what you can do by digitizing everything, I'm going to pass the topics back to Milind so that he can talk about other topics within Industry 4.0 above and beyond digital twin.
Perfect. Thank you, Craig. Thanks for walking us through some really powerful tools that we use within Flex. And I know you and your team have spent a lot of time working with customers to implement some of these visualization, simulation, and digital twin wherever necessary. I know you come with a lot of knowledge and power within your team. All right, so what I'm going to do is in the next few slides, I'll try to connect everything that Craig has mentioned within the scope of his simulation world to some of the trends that we are seeing in Industry 4.0. To me, Industry 4.0 is all the advanced technologies that we have tried to implement today. It's an ever-evolving process, but what can we do today to use best technologies, advanced technologies, and any additional technologies to make our manufacturing more suitable to the ever-increasing demand? When I think about that, the things that Industry 4.0 is transforming is these 4 items that you see in the 4 different quadrants. Craig spent a lot of time on simulation. I don't want to dig deep into that. There's the world of digitization. So it's everything that Craig talked about in the last few slides. What I want to do is I want to take you through some of the automation and robotics pieces of things and how it's correlated to Industry 4.0. Another piece that's part of this is additive manufacturing. However, within the scope of today's seminar, we're not going to cover that topic. It's a massive topic. It needs its own 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. So my goal is to double click on automation robotics and walk you through some of that. At the end of the day, we use all these technologies keeping 3 big things in mind. Like you can see on the title, it's all about efficiency. It's all about quality. And how do we do all this and make products that are sustainable? So just keep thinking about these topics while you go through your simulation, digitization, and your implementation of automation and robotics. Okay, so now double clicking into automation, some of the things that we are seeing more and more is wherever necessary, wherever automation is necessary. I'm not saying everything needs automation. A lot of systems, even today, are best served with manual operation. But if it's needed, how do you ensure quality and consistency using some of our automation updates that are happening in the industry of medical devices and medical technology? The first thing is, and we briefly saw a video in Craig's presentation, flexible automation. When I think about that, the first thing that comes to my mind is modular. How can I make things as modular as possible to serve my purpose? Can I swap things really quick without sacrificing quality and performance? So a lot of companies, a lot of people are paying close attention to how can I make things modular and flexible as far as automation goes. My next topic is all about using robotic cells and end-of-arm tools. So think about cobots. Think about semi-automated system. I don't need a full-blown high-throughput system. Can I make do with some smaller subsystems that are still very intelligent and automated. So that's the repeatable tasks that can be done using some of the semi-automated techniques. Where do we want to get with this? Reduce errors, right? Make it more consistent. So it all comes down to quality and consistency, like the topic says. So those are the two big things. On the top, now you've created your baseline. You've created your automation systems. You've implemented your robotic arms. It's doing its thing. Everything comes down to, can we test this? Can we make sure that everything is inspected in the right manner? So we are seeing more and more automated inspection and testing systems that we've been implementing within Flex, and we are getting the whole concept is well received with our OEM partners. So some of these include the high precision, high speed testing capabilities, and some of the reduction of variability, and how can I reduce human errors using automation and inspection and testing. So that's the whole theme of implementing that within the scheme of automation. Last but not the least, on the manufacturing floor or in our warehouse, how do we automate some of the routine work like scanning and object tracking? I'm not taking away the value of having humans on the floor, but what are we seeing today? We are seeing people's willingness to implement drone systems. So even today, we see drones and automated storage and retrieval systems that are scanning different parts of your manufacturing floor to make sure it's doing the right cycle count, to make sure it's doing the right inventory management. Everything comes down to how can I streamline my medical products through an efficient process. So we are seeing that more and more. How can I automate the scanning and object tracking within our manufacturing floor and even warehousing? Because that itself, when you speak about millions of parts a year, the warehousing scheme becomes extremely critical. Now that we've spoken about automation, robotics, we spoke about flexible automation, what I want to do is I want to club them and bring them together into the world of continuous improvement. So I have everything done. How do I constantly think about improving my existing systems? Three things that we have done a lot, and we are seeing this more and more, is the first one on the top left is operator assistance. I'm going to play a video right after this, but we've been successful in using augmented reality to provide assistance to our operators who are manually assembling complex systems. It has been very well received on our manufacturing floor to reduce any sort of human errors. Fatigue happens, and people get tired, but we want to make sure that we help them using augmented reality as much as we can. So what you see in this video that should play in a second is how our operators are being assisted using some of the go, no-go systems, and you'll see that in a little bit. I'll let it play. So the operator is trying to assemble complex systems, and using the move forward, look at item 1, item 2, place the right tubes in the right spots. So this is what we've been implementing today, and it is very well received in the industry. And I think this is great for two reasons. One is operational efficiency, and number two is training the staff. So what's the traditional way of training? We write work instructions, we circulate that among operators, they take a test, we put them on the floor. That is great, it works. But how can we make sure that they learn on the job along with all the work instructions that they're reading on their desk? So operational efficiency and your training is very well served using some of the augmented reality that we are implementing on our floor today. The next part is predictive AI. We are using a lot of data analytics using Flex Industrial Internet of Things. So we try to place as many sensors, smart sensors in place to detect. This goes back to Craig's topics about how can we predict something that's going to happen in the future. It can be just a trend. Hey, your temperature is increasing. Hey, the relative humidity in the room is increasing. So how can we predict all that using smart sensors on the manufacturing floor? So this is what we see, and that's directly applicable to maintenance and safety using predictive AI. The third piece goes without saying, how do we keep optimizing the process, right? So we've been using a lot of AI ML capabilities to help remove any sort of bottlenecks, any roadblocks that we see by predicting the future, predicting the failures that can happen, and debug them or plan for them well in advance. So all that is your process optimization. So just to wrap this slide up, think about, I do have a system in place. How do I improve this? And what tools do I have to make these necessary changes? What this does is it brings me to a case study that I want to quickly share with you, where a customer came to us with a challenge. So this was a medical device customer. They are into building class 2 diabetes products. They said, hey, Flex, we want to accelerate and we want to optimize production. Can you help us scale up? And this was during the time of pandemic. So they were like, how can I make sure that I'm ahead of the game and keep in mind the global pandemic that's happening? So that was their challenge statement to Flex. What we as a team did was we provided a solution where we created a discrete event simulation platform for them. What this means is we created a baseline. How does manufacturing look today? What are the different representations on the floor? How many direct labor do you have? What's the line layout? What equipment do you have? What are the parameters on that? So we created a baseline in the form of a DES model. What that helped us with running what if scenarios. So now you have the power of turning the knobs in different directions. Hey, what if this happens that way? What if my thermoforming pressure is at a certain value? What if my ultrasonic welding equipment is running at a certain process parameter? So we could run all these what if scenarios on our manufacturing floor in a digital fashion. So that's what we did. It doesn't stop there, right? We are still in the world of virtual simulation. So it's still on the computer, it's looking great, but the whole point of doing this is connecting this to real subject matter experts who are living this day to day. So the third point that you see here and all the way in the bottom, these outputs were reviewed with some of our subject matter experts to see if this optimization really makes sense or where are we with this. So we did all that. It was very well received because we got some real good feedback. The biggest win for us was all this was done in 3 weeks' time. So you don't have to spend days and days and weeks and months on this. So we have mastered the way of doing this in a quick fashion. So this was done in 3 weeks, and great return on investment, right? You don't have to run design of experiments now. You don't have to tweak all this in process. And keep in mind, you have production running. So this is great ROI for the customer. And there are a few metrics that I wanted to point out in the bottom right of the page where there was increase in the output, 75% or 70% increase in output, 47% increase in production per quarter. That's significant. And way we did that was just think about everything that we spoke about in the last 30 minutes, the trends, the digital twin platforms, and how did we run what if scenarios. So everything came together to get us to the metrics of 47% and 15 to 30% of other improvements. When I say other improvements, those are some non-tangible ones, right? What happens if there are work cards that are lined up? What happens about work in progress products? So all those are, we don't typically think of them in a manufacturing setup, but it has a lot of value, and all that adds up to your process efficiency. So I quickly wanted to bring this up saying that, hey, we have tried and tested this multiple times. This is one example that I wanted to bring up with one of the world leaders in diabetes care product.
Yeah, I'll actually just go and point out that both this and in some of your previous topics of predictive AI and process optimization, really, they tie directly back into the digital twin, the level 4 and the level 5 digital twin that we were talking about here. So these all tie together very well.
Perfect. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, I think it all comes together. And Craig, if I'm not wrong, it all depends on what level do you really want to get into. Do you want to make it autonomous? Do you want to make it predictive? I think you got to decide those things. And like you rightly said, you got to ask the right questions. That's where you gain the most value. And it's all about the analysis never lose sight of the analysis and the questions you want to answer by doing all this.
Could you help me understand how long that middle column took, the solution part, putting all of that in? That sounds like a great undertaking. I'm just, how long does that process take?
It is. So what happens, Tom, is I spoke about digitizing everything, right? So at that point, we had all the data. So we knew exactly what the process looked like. So it was all about taking that data, plugging it in the model. So that's a quick turnaround. If you're at a point where you're gathering data and then plugging into the model, that takes much longer. So within 3 weeks, this was brought up and ready for running all sorts of what if scenarios.
Wow.
So I would say that's the turnaround time. It sounds very fast, but keep in mind, we had all the data that was collected about how we run our baseline model.
And in fact, we had that baseline model that, we've been building the model all along, from the proof of concept to the proof of engineering to, in this case, the optimization or proof of operations model. So having the model and being able to just expand its scope and make it ask slightly different questions that are appropriate to where you are in the project now makes it go a lot quicker if that's really what you need to do for it. You don't have to start from scratch each time.
Very cool.
Right. Yeah. It's all about you got to keep thinking about this. Make it fundamental to your work knowledge, so that you don't do this at the last minute. Just keep thinking about what else can I do? How else can I simulate this? All right. So that brings me to some of the closing remarks. And Craig, jump in if I'm missing something. But over the last 30, 40 minutes, what we saw is we spoke about some of the macro trends that we are seeing in medtech manufacturing. So you picked up some of that. Craig took us through all the advanced technologies, all your visualization, simulation, and digital twin. I came back in, we spoke about Industry 4.0, how you can leverage digital twin, make your automation flexible as much as you can using smart sensors, using industrial Internet of Things, and eventually tie all that to some of the AI ML activities that can happen. And we've been doing this for a really long time. So if you cannot do that, we are there for you. Feel free to ask us questions. If not us, make sure you find the right partner who has this knowledge and capability to do this for you. So that's with that. Craig, anything else you want to add to the closing statements?
I think that's a great closing, and I'll actually just rephrase your last sentence, which said do this for you. Let's rephrase that and say let's do that with you. I think it requires a great cooperative team to make this stuff actually happen and be useful.
That's right.
I'm muted. All right, let me try that again. We'll take questions from the audience, but I mean, I think the principal one people probably are wondering are, how do you get started? I mean, if you've got a traditional plant, you haven't incorporated any of this or much of this, what is the first steps other than reaching out to Flex? What does that process look like? I guess kind of talk us through a little bit what kind of work you've done some of that already, but what kind of work would be required?
Yeah, sure. I've done this in a lot of places. I mean, and certainly as Tom said, is one of the first steps is going to be to find a partner to work with. But even given that, the first step is to learn more about it with, webinars like this one or even more detailed ones. Once you've done that, you actually need to spend a good bit of time actually really understanding your system in a great way, and the data and information about it. If you're going to be working on doing this within yourself, you're going to need to get training. You probably should get training anyway. And I will point out that if you're a relatively smaller organization, so that you're going to have just a single person, it's hard. It's very hard to do if you're not doing it full time. And that's certainly one of the big advantages of using a partner like Flex is we have a number of people who do this full time, and that actually makes it more successful. There's a certain amount of art to it along with the science, and art is better if you're practicing it, right? So that would be really the main first steps.
And is the process, is it a site visit? Like how does this ball get rolling
Sure.
once they've reached out to you?
Ideally, there's a site visit. Depends a little bit on the size of the system. And certainly if you're doing a proof of concept model, then the site visit is looking at a drawing or hopefully a visualization, as I mentioned a minute ago. But the site visit, and you're going to walk through it, and you're going to follow one unit through the system in your head, and be able to write that down so that you can write down, well, here's what happens at each one of these steps. If you can write it, you've already translated it from the physical into something. Now you can translate it from the physical, or even the idea, into something else, being the simulation itself. So you'd go through and do it that way. So once you really need to spend the time to understand your system, how it maybe interacts, and then why you're asking to do this. What's the questions you want to ask? It can't just be everything. You actually need to think about that a little bit. And certainly it can answer more questions than you expect, but you do need to think about the primary ones.
Well, I guess that is the question, right? I mean, people will ask, why should they do this? And what are the, you've gone over much of that here today, but if someone's walking away from this presentation, what are the 3 questions they should be asking themselves?
Right. Okay.
What are the 3 questions?
What are the 3 questions you should ask yourself?
Yeah. If someone says, look, if someone's thinking we're good at this already, why should we adopt this? What are the answers to those questions?
Tom, I would come up with one to start off, and Craig, you can join in. Look at your bottleneck. Do you see an issue on any certain subsystem within your entire process? Start there. Do you think it can be improved? Look at your scrap rate. Look at your yield. So those are some really big red flags that can be raised right away. And that would help the user to say, you know what, I think this needs fixing. How do I fix it? Maybe digital twin is an option. So think about where your challenges lie within your manufacturing layout.
Yeah, and often they're ones that you might look at and think, well, that's just endemic. And then the model will help you understand why they actually happen. They're not just because. That's the goal. Models are really good at things that are hard to figure out just on paper. They look at interactions, how things interact. If you have, longer times, say on one event, on one machine at the same instant, when you have a shorter time on the next one downstream, you've just lost capacity. That's really hard to do when you're trying to work that out on paper. But a model can show you exactly what happens there. So you need to be able to think through what questions you want to ask the model of how do things interact, right? It's not just about, okay, how fast it is. It's how do things interact? And then the question becomes, how does how they interact affect the KPIs that I'm trying to improve?
Yeah, that's a great point, Craig. On the case study slide, the image that you saw in the bottom left was what are your variables and what are your constraints? So make sure you understand these are the things I can change, but I also recognize that these are the things I cannot change. So always keep thinking on those lines, what can and what cannot be changed within your process.
So someone's asking the question as to whether advanced simulation digital twin can be used for concept and design.
Yeah, of course. I think we mentioned that is simulation is great for that. To work with the engineers to simulate it, to come back around and do iterative design issues, as point out things that maybe the engineers hadn't thought of. As I said, the interactions on there. The digital twin is perhaps, at least in my definition, is a little less useful for design initially, but it's certainly great for understanding how a system works so that you know how to make it better or how to do the next one even better. And I think that's a great value on it. There's always value in understanding how your systems operate. And that's what all of these technologies are really good at. They're taking all that data and being able to figure out what to do with it in a way that's much more realistic or easier to interpret, understandable, clear than something like just putting it in a graph in Tableau or something like that. It lets you actually use that data to much better advantage.
Interesting. Linda, I was just looking at the AR operator slide in the video that you had. Are those being worn all the time? Are they being worn only during training? Is there a limitation on how long those can be used for? I haven't used AR as much as VR, and I know VR can get your head spinning sometimes.
So the best part about that, Tom, was the user doesn't need to wear anything.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So the user is doing his own thing. He's got gloves on. He's got PPE. All he's getting is assistance from the system that is situated on his work desk to do the complex operation. So you don't have to worry about putting something on for 8 hours shift and 3 shifts. You don't have to worry about any of those. So it's that's the beauty of having everything operator assistance.
That's interesting. And also, I was curious with the when you were monitoring an entire plant and looking at temperatures and such, are those typically monitored by people on site, or are they monitored remotely by people at corporate headquarters? I imagine it can be anywhere, but what is the reach of the monitoring capabilities of these systems?
Typically they're available, online already, depending on whose system you have. Schneider Electric is sort of a common one, and they frequently have that sort of thing. For the scope of a digital twin, most often it's relatively local. It's to the level of the plant manager and the line manager. But they can be, sometimes they're located in multiple places, so anyone who's working on a particular area of it can walk up, and often they're touch screens, and can get to it right then where they need to. So certainly it is stuff that can be looked at further up, but they're going to look at different things that we're also collecting, throughput and yields and things like that. If you wanted to have perhaps the plant manager or even managers above that level look at it.
And does this sort of monitoring come into play? Is it helpful with FDA inspections and things like that, or is this data not used for those purposes? It's just more internal operations.
I think it's all connected, Tom. Internal operations, yes, but then it's got its positives that FDA really appreciates. So we've shown data and evidence how this is being useful to come up with better quality and more consistent products that we send out in the market. So it's all connected.
Fascinating. So just, I guess, final question: what are some of the common challenges in using the simulation and the digital twin in medical manufacturing? We can kind of just do a wrap up.
Sure. I think for me the most frequent challenge is in understanding units of measure. We're collecting data from a variety of different systems and trying to make decisions based on them. And this is something that hopefully will go away over time as these become more integrated. But right now, one of the issues is that different systems measure the same thing different ways. For instance, a system may include the loading time by an operator in the process time, whereas another system, either another machine or just a different system collecting the data, might measure only the process time after the machine is loaded. So you need to make sure that you spend enough time to understand what all of those fields that you're collecting mean. And I think I mentioned that before. If it's really important to understand your system, that's the key to it. And of course, data like that and getting consistent single data set is a whole nother topic that I suspect could be another half hour or 40 minute presentation here at some point. So
yeah, one small point I do want to mention, Tom, is how has this evolved over the last decade, let's say? A lot of medtech companies have been using product simulation, right? You take your product, you run your analysis, structural analysis, fluid analysis. So all that was great. But over the last years, what I'm seeing is how this has now translated into manufacturing. So now you're talking about design, even concepts before design. So concepts, design, your NPI builds, and all the way to production. So I think this is the evolution of simulation and digital twin, of taking it all the way from the product to your manufacturing world, if you will.
Interesting. Well, if there are no more questions from the audience, I guess my final question, Melinda, you talked about the past decade. Always love to end on a future-looking perspective. What is this? What are we talking about 5 or 10 years from now? I have a feeling that this is going to be a lot more commonplace and a lot more familiar to people.
Yeah, in my mind, I think data is king at this point. There's going to be a lot of data collection happening, but at the same time, and we take a lot of pride in this, the IT security that goes with data. You got to have really good control and command over what is collected and what is transmitted within the system. It could be at your plant level, or it could be somebody sitting in Europe and looking at the data within the same organization. But how do you secure that IT security piece with the data that has been coming out, and the whole simulation that Craig has been talking about? How do you run all that, capture data, and securely transmit that to different audience? I think that's going to be front and center in the next few years.
Craig, any final words?
I think that's spot on. I think a lot of the technology is beginning to become mature, and now that means it's when we're getting into the detailed things like the data security and data consistency. I think that's where it's going to go, and it'll make the whole thing about where we're going in both of those directions will make doing these projects much easier, much in the way that I mentioned. The visualization ones are easier using the game technology because it's new. We'll have the new technology to make the simulations and the digital twins even easier and more powerful.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, the sector certainly needs these efficiencies, and data is increasingly becoming queen or king, however you want to look at it. So there's definitely an intersection of all these trends. So thank you for sharing a vision of the future. We appreciate the glimpse.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
Great.
Thanks for the chance.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to be rambling for 30 seconds or so. If you have a quick question or you want just Flex to reach out to you, just put a little note in the Q&A box, and they'll know to reach out. But thanks for joining us on this episode of Device Talks Tuesdays. Once again, it's great to have a sense of where we are and where we're headed in the medical device industry. So I'm grateful to Flex for sharing their vision here today, and I'm very grateful for you for spending some time on this Tuesday afternoon, evening, or morning, depending upon where you are. We'll be back next week with another episode of Device Talks Tuesdays. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.